G'day, hobbyists, and welcome back to The Hobby, the podcast where we explore all things related to hobbies and passions, from trading cards to pop culture and everything else in between. I'm Dean Allsop, your host, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the one, the only, Leroy Jenkins, the Colonel.
What's happening, Dino? What's happening, hobbyists?
I love that I fully coined your nickname, the Colonel. Like, in your whole life, no one's ever called you the Colonel. I started calling you the Colonel, and now you are the Colonel.
Yeah, it was always Kearnzyz, Kearnzman, legend, the best.
Sheesh. No chance. Jeez, he's pumping himself up for today.
Well, mate, there's a reason for that. I've had a bit of a breakthrough.
Oh, okay.
So last weekend, Flesh and Blood Locals.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there playing away, get a few wins. It's great.
Yeah.
Had a win against the national champion of Australia.
Does that mean you're number one now?
I think so. I think I'm pretty much the best.
If the national champ then loses, like, don't you take the title? I know it's not in the national setting, but you technically beat the best in the world, right?
Pretty much. Shout out to Zach Gardner. He's one of the best players out there. He's so great to watch. You know when like you can sit down and just watch someone play a game?
Yeah.
Watching him, you can see the thought process, the numbers, calculating, everything like that. He's such a consistent player. He was playing a new deck, a newer deck, not the one he won Nats with, but my Goldbane deck is a bit different to the meta, and like commented on that after the game going, wow, it's really aggressive. It's a bit different. Usually the play style is a little bit different, which caught him off guard. Yeah. Which felt awesome because I was like, yeah, cool. Awesome. Nice. So nice. I've finally had a bit of a breakthrough, which is great. I'm also building my second deck. So I've kind of played Goldbane down for a bit now. It's time to build my Florian deck, and I'm building that on the side as well. So hopefully I can have a bit of success with that.
Nice. In other news, the Steelers are on top of the AFC North. So very happy about that.
And equally, we are now equal top in the NFC West because we are 6-5, I think. So
6-5. We're 8-3.
8-3. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everyone in the NFC West is 6-5, 6-5, 6-5, 5-6.
Interesting.
So really competitive.
It's been a really good season of footy so far. I'm enjoying it. It's been fun. But let's not kerfuddle too much, because you're all probably wondering, why is this episode going live on a Friday, randomly out of the blue? That's because we have time sensitive and a very special guest today, and we're ecstatic to have him on to talk all things TCG, but also Metazoo. It is Charlie Hurlocker. So let's get him in. Let's have a chat. The new owner of Metazoo, lifetime collector and TCG enthusiast, and certainly one of the experts within the entire industry. Charlie, we are so stoked to have you on today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys getting up.
Yeah, it is early for all the listeners out there. It is early. What is the current time actually in the US right now?
On the East Coast, it's only 2 p.m. So it's not. This is really convenient for me. This is
what we aim to do. That is what we aim to do.
Charlie, I think for our listeners out there, it's going to be really good for them to get to know you, the person, first before we start talking about Metazoo. Did you want to talk a little bit about your childhood growing up and what drew you into collectibles?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I don't know. The long answer is that I just always loved trading cards, and I've always had sort of like a little bit of an identity crisis when I'm in, like, so the main thing that I collect is like Pokemon trading cards, or that I have collected. I've collected other trading cards, but that's kind of been the consistent thread from when I was a little kid. And I didn't like the video games, didn't play the video games, didn't watch the movies, didn't have much of the merch, and so people will talk about all of these kind of like core things that like got them into the trading cards. But for me, I just like, as soon as I saw them, I was like, I have to have these. Like, I don't know why. Like, I really don't. It just stuck. And I think that the act of collecting trading cards has always just resonated with me. And as I've grown up, obviously your interaction with that becomes more sophisticated, more mature. But this idea of just sort of like, I like curating these things that I like and find beautiful, and putting that together and then displaying those and sharing them with people has always been a really interesting passion.
Find that so interesting that you never watched the show or played the video games, but you collected the cards.
Did you ever play the Game Boy games like once? Did you pick one up and like try it out?
So when I was in 5th grade, my friend had Sapphire, and I gave it a shot. Is the best I could say. I later Scarlet and Violet came out, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people were like, oh, like I've really, really, really close friends. They're like, oh, I picked it up. This is great. I'm playing this thing or whatever. And I went and I bought a DS, and I bought the cartridge, and I didn't even make it an hour. Like I was just like, I was like, oh, this is work. I hate this. Like this is like my least favorite thing. Yeah. So I've never really even. I have never been able to connect with it. Like I understand from like a top down, like why people love this thing. And I'm fortunate also that I've, surrounded myself with people who do love this aspect. So I don't know that, like, it's not like it's missing from the IP or missing from my circle. Like I get it. You know what I mean? But it just is like, it's like work to me. Like I don't really, I'm not in love with it. Right. So.
There an earliest memory you've got in regarding the trading cards? Like, some people still remember their first pack. They might remember their first holo. They might remember who it was that introduced them to it. Have you got an earliest sort of memory in that aspect?
I don't know. I mean, the timeline is fuzzy. So like earliest, I don't know, but I have like key early memories. I remember like my first holo was an unlimited fossil Ditto that my mom laminated for me to keep it safe. So really, yeah. So that's great. And then
it's because it should survive everything.
No, my entire collection got stolen when I was a kid. So I don't have any of my original stuff at all. Yeah, got stolen at church. It's the worst.
There's some bad comments.
It's meant to be the safe space.
Yeah, no, crazy. Yeah. So, that was, I mean, I think at the time I was devastated, but like in hindsight, I don't know. Like, I think if anything, like the fact that did happen and I did still collect the cards, like that says a lot, right? Because I think for a lot of kids that would have been like the end, but it wasn't a phase,
When you were younger, here in Australia, Pokemon cards actually got banned from schools. Because
they did, yeah.
So, because we were like trading them on the playground. Did they ever get banned from schools in America? Because kids were like grade 6s were ripping off grade 1s and taking holo Charizards for a Machop base.
Guilty.
Yeah. Kids are awesome, right? Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a thing. Like, I mean, I think in general, like America, at least, when there's like a huge culture thing that happens where it's like all of a sudden all the kids are doing a thing and they just kind of become like really zoned in, there's always sort of this like really harsh reaction to it because people just don't know what to do. So I think like right now that's kind of like what all of a sudden everybody's like, all these kids were on TikTok, like all of them, right? And then you have like social media, I mean, has been tearing up kids' psyches for a long time. So like it's Yeah. But the idea that like all of them would convert to a single platform like very quickly, right? Like that like caught everybody by surprise, and then like Congress is involved. You know what I mean? So like we see it now too, but like back then, I mean, I think trading cards were a really big one, and it wasn't. What's funny is I don't ever remember. Like I remember being asked not to bring them, but in terms of like really these kind of like dramatic bans, like I don't know that was a part of my experience per se. But I mean, I remember more with Yu-Gi-Oh! Because the subject matter was slightly more controversial, right? Like some people felt that some of the characters were risque, or like some people felt that like some of the characters, like it would be like Egyptian god cards, and people were like, what? Like, what are you doing? Like, you have what now, Timmy? Like, so it's, like I remember that being like slightly more controversial. But even then, like I have memories of them on the playground, so clearly they were getting through. Whether there was a ban or not, I don't really remember any of that. I got lucky too that I had like at least one teacher early on who like I actually didn't like him as a teacher, But like I had like a great interaction with him through trading cards because he was a trading card guy. I mean, he was really into at the time it was Pirates constructible card game, and yeah, that's like a WizKids product. I'm fairly certain, and
but I want to look into it. I like old obscure games.
Dude, it's crazy. There's actually a lot of sets. It came out for a really long time. They're like little plastic cards where you punch ships out, and then you can actually build those ships and then play like a tabletop game.
What? I like that's sick. I'm gonna have to check it out. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, but it was crazy too. Is I think that was something that like kind of like again like there's like the way that you would expect a kid to interact with it, but like when that came out, I had no interest in building them whatsoever. So all the kids were like building them, and he was like encouraging them to like build and play this game. And I was like, I want all of the rarest cards in mint condition in my binder. Like that was like the way I was reacting to it. So yeah, that was like probably a sign, as to how I would continue to interact with this stuff. So.
Yeah. Before we move on from your childhood and where trading cards began with you, I wanted to ask, was there any really big influences on you as a kid? Did you have a family member or a friend that was a really big influence? Because as I was growing up, my mum used to collect a lot of trading cards. So she collected a lot of Michael Jordan cards. And when Pokemon came on the scene, we'd find ourselves at the local market every fortnight trading cards. Like for my chores, I'd get rewarded with packs of Pokemon cards. And for me, to this day, I'm very fortunate. I still have a lot of my original collection from when I was younger. So I have complete base set right up through E-Series Pokemon.
You really like to flex that all the time, don't you?
Well, well, it's a fond memory for me. And,
of course.
And when I pull that binder out now and I look through those cards, like it'll always be something that I will remember my mum about, So for you, Charlie, do you have someone like that when you were younger that really made an influence on you?
Nope. I mean, I had like the teachers that was into it, but like I was already into them. And then, even when I think back, most of the friends that I made around trading cards were online. So like, it wasn't, first off, the community just wasn't that large, right? Pokemon was really small. Like I remember like being in middle school. And at that time I had started like buying and selling like other friends' collections. And, I remember having to like beg people because the payoff was so little that like I was like, please like pull out your binder, like find them, like because they even then they were like, oh, I've got these old cards, like a few years, right? But yeah, people had binders and like they just couldn't even be bothered. So like the uphill for me was getting people to just care enough for me to be able to interact with their cards, let alone getting people to do like that. And the other thing too is that I don't know that the sports market had really recovered yet. So like, it really aggressively crashed in the 90s from overprinting. It crashed. And I remember like there would every now and again, I would go to a comic store, and comic stores at times would have sports cards in a front counter. But there were no sports card stores. Like I didn't interact with any, and I think that those recovered and started coming back before Pokemon did, and it was kind of like I think that a lot of people. One of the things that's interesting is I think that there's like this kind of like love for the things that go on, but if the industry does not meet the underlying needs that those people have from an economy perspective, they'll go dormant. And so it's not that they don't want to interact with them, but I think that having this minimum amount of sort of like value, blowing these things out strictly as a commodity doesn't work. It definitely does not work. And so we've seen that with lots of these types of collectibles. And the sports cards is more prone to kind of issues with that because it has no underlying utility. So you don't have, like, you can't fall back into like, well, it's still a playable game, right? And so when you think of sort of these, like the metagame stack of like what these products are supposed to be and where can you establish sort of a beachhead where like you can, worst case scenario, like you can keep that thing going and then kind of reattempt to build on top. When you get sort of these one-dimensional products, it can be really challenging to get that going. And then, we kind of, there's like this critical mass in society and culture where it's like, if it doesn't hit that amount, you're not running into it in retail environments. You're not thinking about it all the time. And so it tends to be a fairly asymmetric experience where you either get nothing and you're kind of just like this core enthusiast, or it's everywhere. And there's just like, it's not a lot of in between, So yeah, it's interesting.
I think it's really interesting hearing you talk about the sports cards in the 90s, because we hear a lot people say, oh, I've got these cards that have been in my cupboard for 20 years. They're all basketball cards. And unless it's Michael Jordan from the 90s, it's not worth anything. But then you could pull out like a Luka Doncic from 2016. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's worth a lot of money. Like the Victor Wembanyama's these days are like, they're a dime a dozen. They're everywhere, but they're worth a pretty heavy buck. I had just had a thought in terms of the basketball cards. I agree in terms of the lack of playability, because there is no trading card.
Yeah.
There is the one thing that sports cards does have in terms of numbered and patchwork.
I feel like they have to, though.
They have to, because you have to have that buy-in. If you pull a patch or a numbered card, you kind of have that little bit of buy-in from that player.
Yeah.
Which is something that I really like. Which is there room for that in TCG world?
Like patches?
Like patches or sketches,
like TCG patch. Yeah. Well, I think some games already do secret rares.
Here's a patch of his fur. Exactly.
Exactly. I was like, I don't know about that, but
the analogs are less attractive.
I mean, because sports, like Charlie sort of said, sports cards have zero utility. So and the value we know, it really hinges off how a player is doing or how their previous season was. So yeah, it's interesting points.
There's a couple of things I'll tease out there. So the first is that, there is an underlying utility, which is that they're an analog for sports betting, right? And so I think that's like a big piece of it is the degree to which people want the new rookie because they're excited about the new rookie, or the degree to which they want the new rookie because it's a proxy way to place a bet on the performance of that rookie. So I think that's a really big piece in the sports market that you just don't have any equivalent in the TCG. The closest I can think is that, again, like falling back into sort of like the game, people may speculate that something will be more playable later. Like that would be kind of the closest equivalent I can imagine, but it's just not a big thing. It's one of the things to say a lot is like, if you have to explain to somebody why something is cool, then it's not cool, which is not, as a collector of like really niche trading cards, like I don't believe that from like a culture perspective. Like I don't think that that's like the only gratifying way to participate. But like if I'm predicting economic performance, then I think that that's true, right? The next thing that I would say with the whole like patch equivalents and the numbered cards is you sort of have a chicken and egg relationship, which is that I don't know if those things are successful in their own right, or if they're successful because when you commit to a certain scheme of numbered cards or limited cards, and that's not, you cannot remake those, you cannot make more of them, you limit your print runs. And so what you see in sports cards is that they'll do way more releases, but they're significantly smaller in the amount that they're producing, versus like a Pokemon where they're determining the ratios, but if there's more demand, they can scale the production and just hold the ratios true. And so it's like, is the one of one rare because people want one of ones, or is the one of one rare because they printed 1/10 as much as they would have if they didn't have the numbered card? I don't know.
It'd be interesting if I was actually talking about it yesterday. If Pokemon ever did, for whatever reason, decided to print a one of one in a set, it'd be similar to what we saw with the one-on-one ring that MTG did with Lord of the Rings, but like on a 10x scale, because the collectability side of Pokemon is so much greater than the collectability side of Magic. So I don't think you'd ever see it. Like, it'd have to be the highest selling card ever. Imagine if they did like a one-on-one Pikachu and Ash and it was like a sketch from like the very first show or something, and then just put it in a set. Like, the world would go insane, mate. Like, think about how many boxes of Lord of the Rings we opened, and we don't even play Magic. Well, we can, but we don't. But like, spent like $7 or $8 opening those boxes. And we're just like, oh, we're just going to try and hit the ring. We're just going to try and hit the ring. You know, like imagine what that would do to the Pokemon world if, you know, there was a serialized card in something as big as Pokemon, you know? It'd be pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's challenging. I think that would be a very bad decision for Pokemon, personally. Yeah, I would be shocked to see them go that direction. It seems to kind of fly in the face of the way that they manage their product. At the same time, it makes more sense for Magic. So I understand, like, because the advantage they have too is it's just a cosmetic difference, right? And so I think really what's telling about that set is that the play fallback and the strength of the customer acquisition funnel that came from the IP that they contracted to produce those cards was strong enough that it's on those lower tier rings, you still see like really strong value, right? That's what's undergirding the value of the product is, and so it's like they made the underlying set desirable enough within their ecosystem that they were able to get away with the stunt of putting the 1-of-1 in, not the other way around. Like the 1-of-1 is not creating the value for that set. If anything, it hurts, it limits the value because you have whatever group of people that might have continued to gamify that set and bet on it isn't going to do that when the big chase is gone. And so like reducing that attractive element of the set, I think is really limiting for the product. So
I think the next best thing to do is move from school to post school, because what we're trying to do is just work through up until, you know, the big announcement. We know you bought Metazoo, so we're excited to get there. But before we do, we kind of want to figure out how you got there. So post school into the working world. You're obviously a big TCG enthusiast at that point. Can you talk us through sort of where you went next and how you got there?
Sure. I mean, I started my trading card business before I left grade school. So I never stopped. And so I continued to buy and sell the cards in high school. And so like I got other jobs like along the way. But like I went full-time TCG like halfway through my undergraduate degree. So I've always been like a pretty intense and that was before the market exploded too. So it felt riskier at the time. I guess the way that I would say it is you did a lot more work to get a lot less return. Which so it was, but I will say there were like other advantages too, which is, you know, every customer you were interacting with for the most part was like a core hobby person. And so there was less lift in terms of like every person that came and bought high-end cards for me, or that, you know, that did card grading and I would help them with that. Or I also like arbitrage, like insurance and just like little things like that. So I was providing these ancillary services and you have to do everything when the market's that small. So I was doing these 10 different things. Like my customer base, they knew exactly what they were getting. Like when they showed up, they knew what they wanted and all of that. Now there's a lot more lift on sort of educating, because it doesn't really even matter. Like you could be selling $1,000 card, which like when I started as a high-end dealer, there were very, very few transactions at that level. Like I would say back then, people would say like, oh, $100 card. Like that's, wow. That's,
what year, Charlie, is that?
Oh, man, I'm so bad with the years. I can relate it to where I was in school much easier than I can tell you like the calendar year. But it would have been, 15 years ago is when I was doing a lot of the buying and selling, was like really ramping up. So
we'll just say circa 2010-ish.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember like the market stages of like HGSS, and then when Black and White dropped. That was, 2011 is when the McDonald's promos happened. That was a big deal. That was a really big deal. That was like a very much a Pokemon's back moment when they were like, thoroughly back into McDonald's promos.
Like, just more Macca's promos. But back then it was like massive. It was like McDonald's.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, really, truly, that was like, we're back, baby. You know what I mean? Like, I remember everybody, all 7 of us that were still collecting them at that point, very excited about that. But yeah, There wasn't a significant like deeper audience at that point. But yeah, I mean, I remember, and that was like the earliest days also sort of like YouTube and like this idea of like having content and communities start to proliferate on YouTube. There were not a ton of people, but 5-10 people were making content consistently and delivering on that, and that was enough. It was sustaining the audience. And I remember there was like I have those like YouTube videos like stuck in my head from way back then. That's like I remember this guy was like flipping through, and he was like, all of these cards are worth more than $50, and we were like, whoa, like there's no way, like $50 each, like that's crazy, and like there's like other things like I can point out, like they said Charizards were stupid cheap, you know what I mean? Like pop 5 packs were like not going for that much. So like some of these references points that I can give you that are valuable now, like we're earning $50 at the time. And so and he was flipping through, and I remember like early Japanese like C tier trophy cards, like the victory rings and stuff like that. And I remember specifically seeing the victory ring, and that was crazy because I was like, I know so little about sort of these types of things at the time. Like I have like a vague idea of kind of like where they sit into the whole ecosystem, but when you're like seeing it and trading it, it's a different experience, right? And then Gold Stars, he's just like flipping through. Like it's funny too, is like even when the game was like not significant at all, like Gold Stars were kind of the baseline, like, oh, these have value, and they were outperforming Shinings, they were outperforming like all crystals, like those types of things where now I think we look at them and we say, oh, all these things are kind of on the same level, but they weren't always on the same level. Like Gold Stars were so truly rare and underprinted, like when you think about the rates at which you hit them and then how little those print runs were, because the game was not super popular at the time. I mean, they look good for their era. I mean, it's a simple frame break with a standard cold foil.
But I'm a Rayquaza collector. That's basically all I collect, other than sealed positions. I just love Rayquazas. So the Gold Star artwork is my favorite. It's just phenomenal.
It's great artwork. Yeah. The artwork is phenomenal. I mean, and this is one of the consistent values that Pokemon's delivered over time, right? Is they almost never gave up on the art stuff. They had me sweating during Black and White, not gonna lie. They got a little heavy on the 5-band approach. Little like all of a sudden, all of your ultra rares are more of graphic design change than they are like an art change. Not a good time to be a collector. Very scary time. I was like, oh man, I really hope this is not the direction that they're going. But then after Black and White era, they immediately pull that back. Right? You see them completely correct it. And it's funny too now, like you'll hear people be like, oh, those are some of the best cards. Those are so cool. We really like those. And I'm like, careful what you wish for. Because it's like, at the time when it was like, oh my goodness, like we have no hand-drawn art. Very scary.
They actually just announced for the middle of next year another Unova set. So imagine if they did that, Charlie. Imagine if they actually went, oh yeah, let's go back to what we did in Black and White in like 2011.
Yeah, well, even like the Terrassal releases, where it's like this is a lot of graphic design and a limited amount of new art, like the Pikachu's in the Surgeon Sparks, right? I mean, you're trying basically your big chase is like, I want the hand drawn one and not the computer generated one. So
yeah, it's been interesting. I think in the Scarlet and Violet era is people call them hats or crowns. I remember when we first saw them, and even to now, some people aren't keen. But you learn to like it's human nature. You grow to love them. Like it doesn't bother me anymore. You know what I mean? I'm excited for the other upcoming sets and stuff like that as well. But
still growing. I'm still growing and still working on that. I don't know that I love them. I think this is like probably like my least favorite. Like from a visually distinct. I remember being at Worlds when they announced it too. Like I was comparing, like, here are the two distinct memories I have. I remember when I was at Worlds and they announced tag teams, people lost their minds, right? Like it was like the end of the Super Bowl. Like you're in a room with just like the energy and just like people freaking out, right? when they announced Wrestle, that room was silent. It was like a golf clap. Like it was seriously, it was really, really awkward for anybody that kind of remembers it. And I don't remember so much uncertainty other than like when they announced Detective Pikachu, people were like not sure what to think or feel. I think history has changed. I think people really like Detective Pikachu. At the time, you didn't have really anything to go off of. Other than if you were in the hall at Worlds, you're actually in the Detective Pikachu movie because there's a scene where like the crowd is like cheering. That was recorded live at Worlds. And so you could, it was really, really cool, actually. So I, like in hindsight, I was like, wow, that's awesome. But like people were like looking at the Charizard and they were like, I don't know how to feel about that. That is very different, you know? It was a little bit of shock. But yeah, anyway.
I guess the idea though, like about that is that's what Charizard would look like in our world. You know, and like even Pikachu, and I remember, is it Snubble or Granbull? One of them just like freaks you out when you see it in the movie. Like,
looks like a little yellow dog, or a little pink dog or whatever, and you're just like not sure about it.
We went a little off track there, which I absolutely love. I love it when we just end up going in tangent, because at the end of the day, the three of us, we're just collectors. Like we're TCG enthusiasts.
I wasn't in the hall at Worlds like yourself, but I remember watching a live stream. I was a big Blizzard player, so I loved my World of Warcraft, loved my StarCraft, my Heroes of the Storm. And a few years ago, they announced that Diablo 4 was going to be on the mobile device, and it got so much hatred. It was like, how have you portrayed us? So I can really resonate with when they go for like, they shoot for the stars and it's like completely missed. Like, no, this is not resonating with your consumer at all.
This is not a good idea.
I mean, I was in the room also like when they announced like Unite, right? And it was also like people just like weren't sure, you know. I think at the time, like, I think this is still true, but everybody's been kind of like, so you're gonna announce an open world, you know what I mean? Like, can we get Breath of the Wild? Can we get that for Pokemon? You know, just like begging for it. And so when it came out, and it was like, okay, you know, like that's great, I guess, you know, like it just wasn't what people wanted. It wasn't what they were hoping for. So that's one thing that's always risky when you do like spoilers, or like try to like early develop that hype, is that like the audience can sometimes decide what they think it is. And then you better hope that what you announce is, if it's not that thing, that it's better. Because if it's like not that thing and it's a lateral move or something like that, they're mostly just like, oh, you know, like that's not what we decided we were getting, you know? So that could be tough.
Yeah, that would be tough.
I wonder if they've learned a little bit of that from that in terms of Pokemon, because the TCG Pocket app just launched and it's a phenomenal app. But I didn't see too much marketing down here in Australia. There wasn't a lot going on. There was an announcement that it was coming out. It launched, and then the app's kind of launched, and it's kind of doing the talking for itself.
You know what initially happened is they teased the artwork they were going to use in this app, and everybody was furious because they're like, this artwork looks so great, it's so phenomenal, how can they only put this in the app and not make actual cards? And then they drop the app and everybody stops complaining about it because the app's so great, they're having so much fun on the app. Like, it's just funny. That was probably, it's almost like similar to the moments that we're discussing, is they're going, we're releasing this app and there's uproar, but then instead of everybody being like, yay, everybody's like, no, how can you have these beautiful cards in this application but not print them in real life? Then the app comes out and everybody's like, actually, whatever, I don't need it in real life, I've got it on my phone, it's fantastic. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I hope that's not the conclusion that they draw. Like over time, you know, like I really hope that Pocket does integrate into some sort of like physical element, or that there's interactivity or programs or something like that where you can get real cards. I really like the Pocket app, and I think it's really great. And I think that as a customer acquisition funnel, it makes sense, especially in Southeast Asia where everybody's got a phone and hardly any LGSs, you know? So like when I think about those dynamics, like it's really important, and I like that. I like that as sort of like a way to get people into the game. I'm looking forward to seeing how they develop more into the game, right? Like for me, it's still a physically oriented product, you know. And I think a Pocket is a demo, like basically, that has no functionality outside of being a demo. I don't think of it as an end in itself. And I suspect that Pokemon also feels that way. I mean, the TCG pays for everything. So they definitely care a lot about the TCG. I think there are huge pieces of that company that lose money that people would think are maybe profit centers, and they're just not profit centers. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that dynamic will shake out over time. I do like the app, but if it is going to be a demo, I want to see more tie kind of to what happens in real life.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Now we are almost, I know the listeners are probably chomping at the bit. They really want us to get stuck into this, the Metazoo stuff, but you did work at one of, I guess what we call the big three in terms of grading companies. And you've also been involved, I'd say, with probably all three. But can we touch on your time at CGC just before we jump into Metazoo? Because, you know, it's always nice in Australia, you know, we have to send all our cards overseas to go to one of those big three companies. So, you know, we don't have any kind of insights there. It'd be great to get, you know, just your experiences and some insights and working stories and whatnot from your time there.
Sure. So CGC contacted me when they were looking for a Pokemon trading card expert. And so my time there was as a subject matter expert, although I had the pleasure of working very closely with Jim and Matt and some of that core early team that was kind of fleshing out. You know, I remember sitting at a table and like literally matrixing out like grades and how different subgrades would plug into grades and kind of trying to find like a satisfying system. Although I think one of the takeaways that I learned from my experience there, at least for the initial grading scheme, which was not popular, to be clear, was, you know, that you can have a system that's very satisfying on paper, and looks very good, and it makes sense, like it's supremely logical, and that can also not be what the consumer wants. And so that was kind of one of the early lessons, was that, oh, there's a gap here. And so like I know that they had to like end up ultimately reworking that, and I was less involved in the rework. Most of the stuff that I did at that point was just database related, was just building out sort of like how do you recognize every Pokemon trading card? I mean, that's really what I was working on. And so that was cool. You know, I had a really good experience there.
A huge like undertaking.
A lot of work. Yeah. It was a lot of work. Years of work. Yeah.
Like, how do you literally said it yourself. How do you recognize every Pokemon card? Like, that's insane.
Well, you almost can't. You can just get to the point where it's like the remaining cards it's not economically viable to do the work in advance, you know? And so you get 99.9% of cards, and then for 0.1% of cards, if they get submitted, you have to do some catch-up work, which is fine, you know. Yeah, but I mean, with CGC, one of the things that was really exciting and interesting early on was, you know, I was working with people who worked on identifying counterfeit money, you know, and coins, you know, like, because it's all under the same parent company. At the time, it was physically in the same building, although they've expanded now, so they have multiple buildings. But at the time, I mean, you could literally walk up the hall and see people creating coins. You know, you could go past a pallet that's shipped from the United States, you know, mint, right? And so seeing that kind of like approach, that's sort of like this very like serious, very scientific, very ironclad approach, you know, and them taking cards that seriously was really exciting, because we definitely had a lot of concerns in the industry that not so much that fake cards were being graded, more so that the industry was not going to be prepared for, if it continues to grow like it has, what may come up, right? Because like it's not so much about the present concern, it's about future proofing your services. So you have to be, when you identify that something is real, you need, like, you're expecting that card will trade in a future market as well. And so you're trying to build the product to be strong enough to withstand whatever growth or changes may come down the road, because every time you put a card in a slab, that's a business card, right? Like those slabs like will speak about your company. They're going to speak about what people's impression is of your services forever. And so that's like a really daunting piece of like kind of providing grading and authentication services. So yeah, it was interesting to work on that. And I enjoyed my time there and learned a lot. And yeah, it was a cool chapter in sort of my career.
I think it's time we start. We revisit, or no, we don't revisit. We go back to Metazoo, which holds a very, very dear place in the heart of Lee and I. We were part of the partner program originally for Metazoo. So we were, I guess, the faces of a portion, or probably the larger portion of the distribution down here, through Facebook channels that we made, through podcasts that we had previously. We've had some really, really good memories. I remember the first set we ever actually we distributed. I've got a photo. I took like photos of Lee like sitting on my floor, boxes all around him, like trying to pack. Like it was like one of those moments like, oh, we should probably capture this just in case, further down the line, we have the big distribution warehouse that we want, et cetera, et cetera. So, we're super, super excited to sort of dive into Metazoo, but to start, when and where did you first hear about Metazoo? I'm going to assume it was probably during COVID, because the hype behind it was unlike anything realistically that we've seen.
Right.
But I think that's the right place to start.
Yeah, I mean, in that era, like I heard a lot about it. I didn't back the original Kickstarter. Almost nobody did, which is why there was so much, right? Yeah, and so I was hearing about it, and something about being in the Pokemon trading card community is that everything that comes out, people are always like, so is this the next one? Is this the next Pokemon? Yeah, people, it doesn't matter. Like everything that, I heard that about Yokai Watch, which just bombed in the United States. And before their set one released, and then they had packs for less than $1 at Target on clearance, like a couple weeks later. But everybody was like, is this the next Pokemon? That's the question that comes up over and over again. And then, I remember that about Dragon Ball Super. I remember that about just all of these games that came out over time. And so in a way, you're kind of like immune to it. People have said it so much. It becomes Boy Who Cried Wolf, and you don't believe anything is significant as it comes out. And so I remember feeling that way a little bit when Metazoo came out. But the main thing that I remember is like I ended up like going live on my channel, which was just to say that like I think people were like way too harsh. I remember like people were just like vitriolic against people who liked Metazoo, and I think part of it was that people like culture was also forming its own opinions about crypto at the time, and so at the same time as the earliest crypto projects, in a pre-regulation environment are falling apart at the seams and blowing up, and so you have billion-dollar frauds, left and right. People are kind of associating that culture together. And so I think Metazoo, because of a combination of the types of people that were willing to take significant risk on it, often also doing crypto, you had that cultural band. And then you also had, I remember exactly when their NFTs came into play, but they were obviously willing to be sort of like a Web3 friendly company, And so I think a lot of it came from that, like, frankly. Like, I think that people were just taking these things and squishing them together and then levying these complaints. But at the same time, what my earliest impression that like really stuck with me was I was like, no, like these people really like Metazoo. Like this is resonating with people. And it was very clear to me because I was like, all of that was happening and you had this kind of like wholesale, just like beat down where like every fan of every other game like just was like kicking this like dying person on the floor as hard as they could. And I just remember like making a video that was like, guys, I think we're being a little too harsh on these people. Like, I think they actually like this stuff. And so, yeah, like my earliest impression was really just the resiliency of the Metazoo community, which was that, I think that their product was letting them down. I think that not just like operationally, which I know obviously ended up killing the company, was just the operational inability to execute. But like, I think that they liked elements of the game in a big way. I think that they liked that it was, it was a little bit edgier than Pokemon. And I think that's what it led to survive. Even was like, I think that in a way, Metazoo is kind of like a punk rock TCG, right? Which is like the people who are into it know that other people hate it. And I think that they kind of had to retreat a little bit into this like group of people, and I see like over time, like people would say that they that like the game or whatever. Like we're always just kind of like waiting for something to happen, which is like that feeling of kind of like perennial advent, right? Is like a very punk rock thing where it's like, people would show up and they know that a lot of the shows are like not going to be awesome, but then they go to a show and it's insane and they feel like they're a part of a moment and they're a part of a thing, And so, yeah, I've never like in an interview, I don't know that I've ever kind of like talked about this impression. This is not the only lens that I viewed the TCG through. But if we're talking about sort of like things that stuck with me early on, was like this resiliency and this community and this kind of like, interest in seeing something cool happen. I've always thought that was like really cool and really unique. Like I can't name anything else that I think kind of developed that way. And obviously the numbers show themselves because it was the most successful indie TCG of all time. Which a lot of people I think also are not willing to give credit to. Like I think a lot of people are like, oh, big 3, big 5, like and nothing else matters, right? But then you look at Japan, which has this incredibly diverse, robust TCG world, where it's like they're not talking about top 3, they're talking about top 20, so we have so much more space they can carve out. And so, yeah, like I like let's call a spade a spade. It's the most successful indie TCG of all time, and nothing can take that away until it manages to one up it, right? So
yeah, that's it. Well, I remember my first experience with Metazoo. One of my friends, Matt, was telling me about it, and another friend, Danny, I think Danny told Matt told me, chain of command sort of little triangle thing, and I was like, yeah, I mean, the name's a little strange, like I'm not really sure what that means. Like, is it like involved with crypto because it was like with Meta then, or is it like zoo animals? Like, how does this, like, I was very confused initially. And as a Pokemon collector, just went, phew, and just put the wall up. I'm like, nah, don't want it. Not interested in it. Nah, get it away from me, blah, 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 blah. And then Matt's like, I'm just going to send you some cards. Sends me an art set of like just from a first edition box. And I was like looking at it, and it was in the middle of COVID. We were probably in our 3rd lockdown down here in Australia because the lockdowns here were just insane, or quarantine. I was like, all right, I'm just going to open it. Opened up the first pack and I pulled a full holo Ghost Train. So it was like nice pink holo. And I was just like, that's sort of, I stopped me in my tracks at that point in time because we don't have a really big emotional or nostalgic attachment to the cryptids in their stories. That is very much a North American thing for a lot of the beasties in that. So it was the artwork that sort of drew me into it in that point, and then from there it kind of just snowballed. Like I went very, very hard, very fast, but because I guess you can't knock it till you try it. That saying is so true, because that was something that I tried to do. I was like, nah, not interested. Then I tried it, and it was the exact opposite, on a coin flip. Right. So what about you, Lee? When did you first come across Metazoo?
I came across Metazoo at the back end of Nightfall. So I was very similar to you. I've always been a master set collector, Charlie. So I was in the thick of Sword and Shield collecting at that stage, and that was taking a big chunk.
Like Vivid Voltage.
Big chunk of my money at that stage. But at the back end of Nightfall, I started to crack some cards, and I actually got gifted a Babe the Blue Ox from First Ed. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is like kind of cute, kind of like this card. And then Wilderness, I went absolutely ballistic on. I collected Wilderness to the cows come home. I think I ended up opening somewhere close to about 85 booster boxes of Wilderness by the end of it. So, and by that
chasing the golden ticket.
By that stage, I was completely like hooked on it. I wanted to just quickly touch back on something you said before, Charlie, in terms of the resilience of the punk rockers out there, the Metazoo fans, because we used to run a lot of learn to plays here in Australia. And the one thing that we definitely noticed is a lot of the people that were playing Metazoo, we hadn't seen them really collecting too much outside of that. It was a lot of new people into TCG. So like you said, the darker artwork, the point of difference that it had over Pokemon, it was that kind of gateway for people to come in. And we met people, I mean, I know you said earlier, like we have no attachment to the cryptids here in Australia, but there was people that were like, that are into that. And now they've got an entry into that. And people from outside Metazoo, I never understood that either. I never understood why people would bash Metazoo, which most successful indie TCG of all time.
Fear.
They tried something. There was like something new in terms of like the fourth wall gameplay and stuff like that. It was, I remember that morning where I woke up. It was about 10 to 6, and there was like 5 missed calls from you, and you just had your first son. And I went, oh no, what is going on?
The day it shut down.
I thought something had gone wrong with your son. I was so nervous. I called you and you told me, and I was just like,
relieved one.
I was like, oh, that's it. Thank God. I thought it was like so much worse.
Harry,
but after I'd gotten past that, I remember that day just being like, I'd had a piece of my like soul taken from me.
Yeah.
And seeing how passionate people are about Metazoo in the Metazoo community, it's great to see and be talking to you, Charlie, as someone here who's come here and reinvigorating and bought our savior, bringing it back, because it really was like our child. And we protected it so much. When people from outside came at Metazoo, we were like, well, hang on a minute. Here's a bunch of cards. Go give it a go. Come play. Right. And if you still don't like it, then you can tell me.
Well, that's the thing, right? If somebody feels like they have the entitlement to have a go at something, then we're entitled to have a go at protecting something. You know what I mean? So if somebody's going to come at us and trash Metazoo, then we have a reason to go back and defend Metazoo. You know, it's the same in the Pokemon world. Like, you know, it goes both ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that kind of comes out is like the idea that the Australian culture or market or whatever is like not as receptive to the cryptids themselves, or doesn't have that nostalgia element. I don't know that that's true. I think what is true is that the product did not give you the opportunity to discover that.
Yeah. So I think that's a completely fair statement. We had a drop bear, like one card, you know, that did resonate, because there is a lot of cryptids that, you know, especially in the Indigenous Australian culture, there is a phenomenal like history and story there. So yeah, I think that is a good shout.
I think that's a large part of how we imagine approaching sort of this balance between a global IP with strong regional iteration is making sure that the product experience and the organized play experience and sort of this like, you know, you have what's inside the booster pack, you have what's outside the booster pack, but it's all kind of like one card experience, right? Like the experience that you have when you go through sort of the prepared retail stereotypical, like what the company is designed for you to do, right? And I think our intention is to give you significantly more in that vein, you know, give you more opportunities to experience the depth that you get out of this product when you do have representation. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to hear you kind of like try to identify some of those, like drop bear, like very familiar with drop bear. And I think that what I'm excited about is however much you felt that your community was resonating now, I think that there's so much more in store for you when you get the experience of sort of like, oh, what if I was represented? What if I did have the nostalgia, right? Like, you opened 85 boxes of just North American cryptids, right? Like, if you end up with like a chase card, that's something that you do recognize, how much more is that attraction? How much more is that excitement?
8,500 boxes is what would happen then at that point. Be like, send us some pellets and we just start shredding packs.
Yeah, at 8,500, you're probably starting to go like, these have gotten more expensive, and I think I'm bidding against myself. Like that's probably what happens at that number. But yeah.
So Charlie, you've now purchased Metazoo, and one of the really big things for our listeners out there is gaining that trust back. Metazoo community has been hurt in the past, and we've heard you talk for the last hour about the type of person you are, the collector you are, and it's really obvious to me that this is something that you're extremely passionate about. You, as a kid, were pulling binders out of other kids' hands, pulling cards out. You've been involved in grading. You've done buying and selling. Something to you is not the TV shows, not the games, but the cards. That's your passion. And now you've purchased Metazoo. Why should the Metazoo community trust you moving forward? What are you going to do differently?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I've tried to tease out from the beginning is that I am not the brand, right? I am not, like, I exist in service of the brand, and I am bringing the resources and the talents that I have and that the people in my circle have to execute in a new and better way. But we have intentionally not asked for people's trust. I mean, we're not kickstarting this game. I'm not asking for your money until the product exists. We have fully funded the marketing. We have fully funded the production of the game. We've fully funded every promise that we're making. And so I think that is the first chance for us to show that we are treating this much, much different from the way that it was operated in the past. And so I think that alone is a really good first step, right? Which is that at the point at which I'm asking you to buy a box is when you can order and then receive that box, right? So there's no, like, we're only working with, real distributors. And so when you place that order, that distributor fulfills that order. There's no sort of like risk. They're not selling that box to you and they don't know if they'll get it, right? Because that's not how the official distribution works. And so, like, we've tried to lean into the industry standards that have made things safe, right? And so, like, by subjecting ourselves to that, because it's not as attractive. Selling direct has significantly higher margin, right? But for us, we understand that there's a value to the consumer that process has, and so we're not using this because it's easier or more lucrative or anything like that. We're really using that as a signal and a value add to the consumer. So that's the first thing that I would hope that people can recognize in the way that it's being launched. I think the next thing is, like, to not try to revise the history of what's happened with Metazoo, right? And so one of the things that, like, I've emphasized, like, we did not purchase the company Metazoo. That still exists. That's in bankruptcy. It's managed by a trustee. That estate still exists. At the time that we purchased the continuing rights for the TCG, they had 1.7 million in claims. When we paid them just over $2 million. So they've got money, to manage those claims. Like, we made certain that the bid that we paid them was sufficient to make the claims that they had all. And so I think that's important as well. And so my hope is that obviously that they will do right by the community and do those things. But insofar as we are structuring this continuation of the TCG that we purchased the rights to, we are avoiding anything that we don't think organizationally we can support or fulfill. We're not doing anything that is outside of, standard infrastructure, standard industry. Where one of the challenges that they were having organizationally was because they were printing oversees like the logistics challenges that came with that and the supply chain challenges that come with that. We're structuring that in the United States, which gives us significantly more control and ability to deliver on that product. So it's sort of like we're taking it just piece by piece, and we're not so much taking it and saying, how do we counter this? How do we improve this? Game Community Labs, which is the exclusive licensor for the product that's actually going to be doing like the production and delivery, they know how to build these companies, right? I mean, they did it for Magic, they did it for Pokemon, like they did it for significantly larger companies. Like we have in-house the knowledge for how to deliver these things, and so we're not trying to somehow like correct a bad company. We only know how to build a good company, and so we're just building a good company with those continuing rights. And so that can be challenging, I think, to the audience in some ways. Like you said, you were a direct partner, right? That partnership program is not going to look the same, right? And so there are challenges, because I do think one of the things that succeeded in a limited way, not a scalable way, but worked for Metazoo, was sort of like this was to have 1,000 partnerships, right? And so like they had all of these like partnerships that they were all managing. And I think that was part of why balls were getting dropped. That's not an organizationally good way to do things. And so simplifying that into more traditional structures and making sure that you can, as a company, focus on the product, making sure that we are not so bogged down in administrative delivery and oversight, that we're not doing art, that we're not doing R&D for gameplay, that we're not, we've really tried to make sure that we understand like where our job is, and then from there where we can build a competent industry support system around us to deliver that. So yeah, to get back to the question of trust, I mean, I think that for us, we're not asking people to go out on a limb, right? I mean, like what we're doing is we're building a real company. We're building a structurally functional company, and then delivering a product that we believe is resonant with people, and that people will have a lot of love for. And so those are two separate things. Like we're building a good company, and then we're delivering what we believe is a good product, and that's it. I mean, that is what the company does. And then the trust will be earned when they see that we deliver our products, and when they see that those products are hopefully better than they've ever experienced. Simple things like using trading card stock instead of playing card stock, and the ability to do additional trading card things with that, right? To add. I don't want to get into the specifics of anything.
I mean, you can. You certainly can.
Promises very quickly, right?
You can get into a lot of specifics if you want.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd love that, right? Yeah. All this to say, I just think that we've spoiled some artworks, and we're building this message that it's like we're not here to not do Metazoo. I mean, we are. Like, I think that you could see in the artworks that we've spoiled. That's Metazoo art. You know what I mean? Like it really is. And I think that the audience is recognizing, they're like, oh, but this is just better. Like it's just we're not. And I think that that's like I think that would be like a totally fair fear, is that I think some people are like, especially if you have sort of this like this interview is going to be all about this punk rock thing, and but that's just kind of like what we're going back to.
Title,
but
punk rock Metazoo.
Yeah, question mark, me evil horns, like me, like yeah, just do it up. Yeah, no, but like if you have that perspective, it's like, okay, well, if my band becomes popular, will I still like them, right? Yeah, that's a whole thing. And so I was thinking about that too, and we're trying to make sure that we don't lose kind of the heart of what's at play. And that's just done through relentless conversation, and we brought back a significant number of the original artists. And one of the things that I'm really proud of, and even just in what we spoiled so far, is that those artists are thriving in the system that we're creating. And that the feedback that they're giving us and to their friends, into the community, is that they're happier, that they're having a really good experience, and then it comes through in the art, and you're looking at pieces where it's like, okay, like, it's not that there's not something cool about the original one. It's just that when you unchain these artists, when you give them time and you give them compensation, and there's not like a chaotic environment around them, that what they're capable of is just really cool, and I think what we're delivering is a world-class, product already. I think when people look at the pieces that we're putting out, the feedback that we're getting and that I see and that I believe in is that it's like, this is good. This is on its own merits, just good.
It's the perfect segue, because I was literally about to ask about the artwork, because obviously, circle back to what I said before about my first interaction, it was the artwork that drew me in. So it was always going to be interesting to see whomever took over Metazoo, because I had the faith that it always would. I remember people coming to me after it shut down, and they're like, "Oh, is it over? Is it gone?" I'm like, there's no chance. You saw what it did in the 1.5 to 2.5 years that it was there. Like, somebody is going to be smart enough to go, we need to grab that and do it the right way. So there's obviously concerns. People have come to me with concerns about art, gameplay, all this other stuff. But the art was the one that I was more sort of concerned, or not concerned, just curious, just to see which route that would go. Because I knew that they had some great artists, and those poor guys and girls were absolutely burned by the previous company operators. So I was curious to see if they were going to come back, and if they were going to come back, what sort of direction was it going to go in? And I can do nothing but stand and applaud, for one, the fact that you've brought back so many of the original artists, and two, the way that the company is obviously approaching them and allowing them to do the art. You can see that in the couple of images that have been spoiled on the Discord, that it's literally gone from one level, like jumped to a whole nother level, and it's phenomenal. But how did those discussions go, like, in terms of the artwork? Because that I think would be an interesting insight.
Yeah. I mean, certainly a ton of conversation has gone into it, right? Because it's somewhere that we don't think we can afford to get it wrong, right? I think that you'll see this or that you've already seen it in the spoilers. It's like one of the things that we wanted to signal, like, really with our first reveal, was that we're not trying to just copy an existing art style that somebody else is doing, right? And so, like, that was really important to us, was like the literally our first message is like, we're not afraid of the nature of cryptids, or this sort of like this like darker feel, or it's funny, like, when I think that a lot of people were afraid that just because of the history of the people involved in the project, that we would come out with our first piece and it would be to Pokemon, right? I think that was like a lot of people's fear. Because if we go and we just create Pokemon, we don't create Metazoo, we just create Pokemon, we'll just be a worse Pokemon, right? Because we don't have the resources to deliver the way that Pokemon does. And so, like, we know that that's not a strategy that we can win on. I mean, I think there's a lot that we want to learn from Pokemon, but we don't want to beat Pokemon. That's not what Metazoo is, and that's not the product we're trying to deliver. But then we dropped the first piece, and people were like, that looks like Goosebumps, and so I was excited about that. I thought that was really great, because I think that's a lot closer to the heart of where we want to go, and a lot closer to the heart of where Metazoo comes from, right? Which is, look, cryptids are often things that go bump in the night, like, it's not, when I say darker, I mean, sometimes I quite literally just mean darker, as in, like, just the artwork is darker in saturation, like, quite literally darker, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think the balance that we're trying to strike is somewhere between, we know and we recognize where these stories come from and what they are. And at the same time, we don't want, by virtue of what we create, to make a room in a community that is smaller than it deserves to be, right? And so, anything where we're looking at subject matter, we're saying like we could have delivered, like when we're talking to our art director, we could have delivered the same impact in terms of the art, but not made a whole religious subgroup or cultural subgroup feel exempted from their ability to participate and enjoy this product, right? Like those are calls that we're going to make in favor of being an inclusive community, and of having people, want to participate. One of the things that really sucks, really is that like there have been retailer conversations that I've had where, people have said, I want to stock the product when it comes back. But, I'm afraid that people are going to come and see this old stuff that I'm just like so completely opposed to and so completely against. I don't know what it looks like to integrate this. And so you see kind of like the pain points that we're already encountering based on that. I think that the IP itself would have suffocated itself like very quickly. So yeah, I think that, and one of the things that's challenging with this type of conversation too is, you cannot win everybody, right? Like it's absolutely impossible. And so I think we're also trying to find ways where it's like, we don't want to wash this thing out, like we don't want to lose our character, we don't want to lose, the feeling that you get from Metazoo's product, right? And so, at the end of the day, we'll be judged by the product that we produce, and we're comfortable with that. That's something that we're ready for, and that we're frankly excited about, because I think that we've done cool work. Yeah, definitely.
Realistically, that is the goal, because like you said at the start, it's not necessarily about you buying Metazoo. It's going to be about the product that you guys produce and put out there, and that's where you're going to gain the trust.
Yeah. It's about you. I mean, it's literally, you're the only person that matters, which is when you open that box. Yeah, it's literally just Dean, No, but like when you open that product, how do you feel, right? Like what, and then from there too. So you open the box and you have these cards, what opens up? Like, do you have additional experiences that you get to be a part of because of that? And so, we're very focused on the human experience, and we're looking for, in the product, in the marketing, in the programming, around everything that we're doing, we're looking for, it's like, how do we double down on the human experience, right? Because that's what we believe has staying power. And there's just nothing else like it. I mean, like if you go with your cards and you get to interact with the brand and people around the brand in a cool way, the impact that has is so disproportionately rewarding, that we're just trying to set those things up and make sure that there's ample opportunity, again, on a global basis, to be able to do those things.
Metazoo gave me a lot of things. It obviously gave Lee and I time together that has created platforms like this and other things that we work on together. It also has given me a lot of friendships over in the US, because I went to the One Casters Cup that they did, and I went to a CollectorCon and I met all these friends, and it's expanded my circle and made my life better. So obviously I'm eternally grateful that it's coming back after going through the ex-girlfriend moment where you're like, oh, she left me, I hate her, it's the worst thing ever. I don't show me photos. And then you catch up a couple of years later and you go, oh, hey, how are you? It's so good to see you. Oh, you look great. Everything's going good. And then you get back together. Something like that, So there's a lot of other exciting things to come. Obviously, I'm not going to prod and pry for all these spoilers as much as I'd love to. With the couple of art spoilers that we've had are phenomenal, because Poncho had a very big cult following, I guess you would sort of say, and Kelsey was the other one, because Kelsey drew the original Mothman, so obviously that was kind of the poster boy card for Metazoo. Is there a few other artist spoilers, coming up maybe in the Discord?
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll share more. Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the balance is sort of like we have things that we want to accomplish through the spoilers, and we could talk about that a little bit. But also that, we don't want to rob the actual product of any magic, right? And so, one thing that we just think is like really missing in trading cards these days, I think you see too much of the set. Like how much cooler, I really think there's a magic where it's like, I think about the early days of TCG, you would go to a pre-release, you didn't know what was inside of it, and that was so exciting. And so it is tough in a way to set yourself up because it's countercultural at this point, where, people almost want to see exactly what they're about, like before they get into it. And, with Pokemon's at a huge disadvantage because you see the Japanese product right before you see the English product. But yeah, like I think that I just want there to be some stuff where it's like there's this process of discovery, and that's a really hard line to walk because it is so countercultural and we are so early in our product where people have so many questions that they want answered. And so like it's challenging in a way because you're right. Like we've not established the trust yet for us to tell people like, just trust us. It'll go well. Like people don't believe us yet. And that's fine. Like, at the same time, I don't think we're willing to give up the excitement of sort of like, you're going to open this product and you're going to discover things. Right. And I want that to be a community experience too. Like, I think it'll be so much cooler if you have 10 friends and you're opening a couple cases, or something like that. Like that experience, like we're thinking about how to make that cool, like what does it look like for you guys to be getting different things, so you have that experience of you're like, oh guys, look what I pulled. And they haven't seen that, and so not washing out everything so that you get it in one box. And that was one area that I think that the old product is pretty weak is I actually think that there wasn't enough in there. And so you cannibalized your opening experience so quickly. I think that was a weakness in the product, like a serious weakness in the product that hurt it in streaming environments. And even though Metazoo did well in streaming environments, I think that it could have been much more. Right?
It was really only the secret rares. It was only the secret rares that they didn't spoil. Otherwise, pretty much, I reckon the entire set we would have seen before it came out.
Yeah. Lee, you look like you got something to say.
Oh, no. I'm that eager, am I? You can just see it.
No, Dean and I will just beat you down. And we talk way too much.
I love hearing you talk about the magic of opening because it's something that we've spoken about before here where if you open cards by yourself at home in your basement, it's no fun. It's fun when you do it with other people. And in terms of like, I think about when I was younger, opening one pack of cards a week was like the best thing in the world. And you'd pull a Ponyta common card and a Diglett and you'd like, every card was awesome. And now as an adult, you can rip a box in 10 minutes just looking for the hit and you lose that magic. So I love to hear you talk about that. And in terms of, we do a lot of card breaks. We have been on Twitch for a really long time. We've just moved to Whatnot because we've got it here in Australia. And we're in a point of privilege where we get to open anywhere from 50 to 150 packs a week and making sure that you're enjoying not just the hits in those cards is so important because it's the whole product. Yeah. To your point, like it's not just the 5 hits in the set. There's artists that have gone out and done 150, 200, 100 cards in this set.
Yeah.
And it all really needs to be appreciated. So one of the things
from the art ordering side, I'll tell you, we spend a lot of money on that common art. So I hope that somebody slows down and looks at it.
Appreciates it. Yeah.
I want to ask you, in life, we like to have a little saying here. We're looking for that 1%. So here at the Hobby Podcast, we have done 20 episodes now, and every episode we just want to be 1% better. And if we can get 1% better every episode, we're heading in the right direction. I think a really great thing that you mentioned earlier is that this isn't the previous company. This is a new IP. And in order to get your 1% and to gain the trust and have people come on the journey with you, you need to surround yourself with a really, really good team. Can you talk a little bit about what that team looks like now? And are you working on any other projects, or is this a purely Metazoo team now that you've assembled the A team to get this off the ground?
The GameCubator team is big names.
Yeah, it's wow. There's a lot there. Wait, so yeah,
we do that unintentionally.
Yeah. The first thing I would say is it is not a new IP. It's the same IP, new company. It's the only thing that's the same is the IP. And then the next thing that I would say is so I want to backtrack slightly because we didn't answer yet sort of like the intention behind sort of the way that we did the releases. So I want to talk about that. Like, let me make sure that I get that in. And you can, if you need to, you can move that around. But yeah, but with the releases that have happened on the Discord, I think that, you know, like I don't want to over speak into the subtext because that too can take out some of the magic. But like, I think that we tried with our very first release to show people like that we're serious about like the way that they like the art. I think the next thing we tried to show them is that we are bringing people back, that we're not afraid of that, that we are taking a lot of care, you know, and that like that piece has detail, that piece has emotion, you know, and kudos to the art director, right? Because the art director really deserves, as the art director and the artist deserve all the praise on sort of like where they managed to get that piece. It's really cool. I even just like the emotion in the fly's face. Like I hope that you guys will go back after this and look at it and be like, oh man, no, that is cool. Like I really appreciate that. Right.
Charlie, hand on heart, I swear, I pointed that out to some of the friends. I was like, no, look at the original and look at the detail in the second one. I was like, yeah, worlds apart.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that people are noticing that. Yeah, that's a huge relief to me. And then I think, you know, with our second release, we wanted to say like, okay, but like we're also tackling difficult characters and we're also bringing in new talent, right? Which is say that the art team is significantly larger than it used to be. And part of that is just that in order to get the most out of, you know, each piece and to give people time, you know, to spend on those pieces. You know, if artists are churning 2 pieces a day trying to get this thing done, like you're just not going to get the love you would get if they just had time to think about it and to put effort and to put iteration and to put all of these things into it. And so I think the second piece also we wanted to say that you know we're tackling difficult characters, right? And so one of the things that was interesting in the process of developing you know, Goofus Bird it's just like the art description on Goofus Bird is wild, right? Like just imagine, right? Like you're an artist, you're a new artist. It's, you know, you're coming to Metazoo and you're like looking at this piece and it's like a bird that flies backwards and also all of its elements are backwards and weird and wacky and like just all of these things. And it's like, oh my goodness, like just the artistic challenge of being able to depict it. I will say it's like one where one of the things I love in the original artwork too is like the eggs on the bottom of the branch. Like I love that. That's not in the new piece. I love that about the original one. And I hope that we get to keep exploring Goofus Bird for that reason. Cause it's just like, there's so much silly stuff you could do with it. But like, you know, like in the art piece, you know, the artist figured out how to depict motion, right? So it's like Goofus Bird, like you want to just do it standing still because it's just like, it's so challenging, but to actually end up getting the motion of like flying backwards. I think he did a great job and I just think it's really cool. Right. And then, you know, there was also sort of this question of like, you know, we released our first 2 pieces and both of those are digital pieces. And then people were like, okay, well, but this hand-drawn artwork, hand-drawn watercolor, right? Like people kept hearing it home. You know, we wanted to make sure that people knew that like that's on our radar too, and that's getting in there. And so not only did we get to come back and say, okay, now people are starting to catch on with our third release. Oh, it's not just Poncho. Like there's actually going to be a cast of returning, you know, artists, and we've demonstrated that now. I think we'll continue probably to demonstrate that. And like with that third piece, you know, we wanted to keep direction setting. You know, we were going to keep all of these things that you love kind of on our radar and a part of this. So as we push into this new direction, I think that it's not even really new. like I like to think of it as broader, right? Which is to say that like we're not doing what was happening before. We're doing it more. We're doing it better. We're doing it, like with in all of these different directions. Like we really think that, by supplying this property with the competency and funding and time that it needs and deserves, that we are going to feel more like Metazoo, not less like Metazoo, that we're going to feel more like Metazoo. Because I don't think that it's the rushed nature of the game that people are like, yeah, that's the thing that really was doing it for me, right? And I don't think that the audience is stupid. I think they can see that, and so that's also part of why we like took a risk and started working on this thing earlier, than we had even wanted. I brought this to GQL over and over and over and over again because I was working in business development at GQL. I think I pitched it 7 times. And then ultimately was like, I was like, okay, like I believe this thing so much, I'm going to put together my own investment group and we're going to go like buy this thing. And so like GQL, like GQL did not buy it. GQL licensed it. And that I'm really grateful that ended up working because I really believe like, and always have, that GQL is the perfect partner to, because I know from the inside, like what GQL is capable of and how cool and passionate this team is. And so one of the things that you'd asked about was like, is the team, like what else is the team working on? It's not that GQL doesn't have any other ambitions or isn't working on anything, but the philosophy of design that we really believe in is that the team needs to be dedicated to the project to make it succeed. And that's one of the lessons learned from Wizards of the Coast, right? Which is that Wizards of the Coast did have a lot of successful properties, but also a lot of properties that should have been more successful. And Wizards was just doing a lot, right? And so we look at that and we think that, giving a dedicated team to Metazoo, in business development, there's a little bit more that I do and it'll come and it's on time. You'll see even that is in service of Metazoo ultimately. But yeah, I mean, like almost every single person that's involved in the project is only working on Metazoo. And that's true that's true for the game, and that's true for the art, and that's true for so much more that we're doing. So
I'm going to throw a curveball at you, which you don't have to answer. But can you allude to if or if not the colors in the back of the cards? Have you guys finalized a design for what that looks like yet? Obviously, that's something that we're keen to know.
Sure.
And if you have, you obviously don't have to elaborate on it. If you can, great. But it is obviously just questions that even, that we see popping up in the community, in the Discord, just little things like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, when you see the back of the card, my hope is that we will have successfully conveyed both some of what we're doing with the storyline as well as some of what we're doing with the game. And so we're looking at creating, some of these really key assets that you have for a very long time, if not forever, right? When we're looking at these critical core components, we're really trying to serve everything that we're trying to do with Metazoo. And so at the time that you're able to see it and you're able to enjoy it, I hope that you'll find the thought, and the things that we put into that in all of those different directions.
I think so. I mean, based on how everything has gone so far, even we should really touch on the relaunch of the Discord, because the Discord was sort of the center of the universe, the Metazoo universe. Basically, in its first life cycle. So you yourself and the team have got a beautiful platform. It's far more easy to use now than it was last time, and that's coming from I was Discord illiterate initially, and then had to get in there and figure out how to use it. First time, I'm still figuring out Discord. I'm not a natural Discord user. It seems a lot smoother now, and my God, the community really rallied around it when it came back to life. Like, even just scrolling on Instagram, all I could see was stories. I'm like, we're back, baby, we're back, and all these memes. Like,
we had
back.
around the clock activity starting in literally the first minute that we opened the Discord, and it never has not stopped. So that's humbling, yeah, in a way, yeah. And I think that you know, the thing about the Discord, right, is like, I think that we know kind of like globally where we want to go, what we want to accomplish, and we can write up sort of these marketing plans and fund them and do all these things. And so, but for us, it was sort of like, man, we just want to end sort of the silence. And so, in a way, I think sometimes people get frustrated because they're like, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you saying more and stuff? And so, and it's tough because like I've got the 40,000 foot view, so I can kind of see it all. And, you know, like I know how much we want to say, how much we plan to say. You know, there's elements where we are holding back intentionally, you know, like I've just said, where it's like, we don't want to spoil the art, right? I want to give you enough to chew on and to have fun and to reward really the people who have chosen to remain sort of in the core community or that are joining us. One thing that I think is really cool is like how many people we have that are like, yeah, I didn't buy it in the original Metazoo, and now I'm excited, you know, and I'm looking for it. And I think that we are definitely gonna have the doors open. We're gonna blow open the doors on sort of like what the breadth of this community can be. And one thing that I really love too is I think we're building on like a really strong foundation, right? Where it's like, again, the people that are remaining are resilient. Like they are people that truly love this game. You have no reason to be here if you don't love the game, right? Like at the end of the day, like it's like just because of like the negative things that did happen in the past. And like I really can't emphasize enough that like we're not trying to rewrite any of that, you know, like we're not trying to be ignorant to it or ignore any of it. And it can be tough too because there were so many things operationally that went wrong. I mean, obviously, like, I mean, I don't even really have to say that, right? Because obviously we bought the IP at a bankruptcy. So like, obviously it didn't go right. You know what I mean? But as we look at these things and like look for these opportunities to do better, you know, we understand that like there are people who they're touchy, you know, they're a little afraid. And I think that we're bringing them good things, like, and that can feel slow, you know, because it's a lot easier to make 100 promises if you're not going to fulfill them. You know what I mean? And so the pace can be that I think some people are used to versus like, yeah, our pace is a little bit slower. You know, we are spending a little more time on things and it will take us. Yeah, for sure. And I also think we're just like, it's kind of like, you know, when you're first learning to walk, you place your foot very carefully each time. Right. And so like, it's, you know, we know how to run, but we want to make sure that we're walking, right? We want to make sure that we're doing everything intentionally, that we understand how these things interact and the consequences of any given thing. You know, we don't want to rush forward and then crash because we don't think that the benefit of the doubt is going to be there indefinitely, you know, as the recipients of an IP that does have a tarnished brand, you know, managing that effectively requires a lot of care. And I think that we're putting that care into it, but it's definitely going to be a process that at times is going to feel challenging or going to feel counterintuitive, right? So my hope is that we can do enough right just to get the patience of the community, right? So that we can have the time to really build on this thing. And it's really interesting too. It's like, I understand like it's coming back and people are very excited for sort of the first set. But that can almost be counterintuitive to us because we don't see the first set as like one thing. We see it as a piece of kind of this bigger vision that we're executing and that we're already developing things for these additional sets, right? Like this is not like a question, like, will this thing come? Yeah, no. I mean, we have like significant amounts of planning and, you know, again, like I know that can be challenging too, right? Because I know that in the past, like there have been promises, right? That are like, oh, all these things are developed. And as the recipient of those files, some of those things are not maybe quite as developed as people, you know, maybe wanted them to be. And so, you know, that's, again, it's like I said, like sometimes there's this challenge where you're not just competing against the reality, you're competing against, well, the community has already made it out to be this like certain thing. And so, like, how do you take an undeveloped promise and then compete with an unlaunched product? Like, there's just this like psychological like challenge as these things kind of like all ran together in this community. But so far, I mean, people are working through it. And one thing that I've really appreciated is just like, I've seen a relentless amount of positivity, right? And a willingness to give it a shot and to give it a chance. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, like, all we got to do, we just got to get to the point where that product's in hand, because I think that product will say a lot.
I can't wait. I can't wait till that point.
I've loved hearing you talk about the human aspect of what you would like to bring to Metazoo and how you want to make Metazoo feel more Metazoo. One of the ways that I felt Metazoo really did that was in their gameplay. And they had their fourth wall effects, which was something that hasn't been done before, whether you liked it or not. Can you talk a little bit about what the gameplay is going to look like moving forward to Metazoo? Because as a TCG enthusiast, the game, there's one side, you've got the collectability of an IP, and then you've also got the gameplay side of it. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like moving forward?
No. Yeah, I mean, so one of the reasons that we've kind of refrained from providing a ton of the gameplay is that it's not as easy to leak bits and pieces about gameplay. And really, yeah, with art, I can show you one art piece and you don't know how I'm going to use that. You don't know, like, all I've done is show you an art piece. But if I show you a piece of the game, I've shown you a lot more, right? And so I don't know that breaking it into bite-sized pieces does as much for, again, I'm trying to protect the satisfaction of people as they kind of get into this thing. And I think what makes it cool is the way that we've plugged all these things together, right? And so, like, there will be the ability to demo the game I'm not making promises, but I promise that there will be opportunities to learn how to play, and we're thinking about, we're supporting, again, the entire metagame stack for the game. So it's not like, I think play was an afterthought in a lot of ways. I think that in the old game, right, I think that there were a lot of times when, maybe you throw support at it technically, right? But supporting a game is R&D. I mean, supporting a game is thinking through the consumer experience in those environments. It's thinking about the long-term economy of cards and how they're going to interact and all these things. And that is, again, like, that is so interconnected that, giving the individual pieces is not satisfying, other than, I think that, trying to think, like, what can I give you? Like, it would be satisfying right now.
I think, honestly, the way you've sort of explained it there, it makes perfect sense. And even myself as a player of the previous game, you're so right. You can't tease like just a mechanic or like just a certain aspect. Like, the reality is even me as a player, I almost want to be able to go like, all right, well, here's a product or a demo of the game, and go all into that in one go, and then come out of the other side and be like, that was awesome. I mean, now I know how to play.
Because what I do think is, I think that we have taken elements that people cared a lot about, and we've pulled those forward into a game system that is not just satisfying, but that's competitive, right? Like, we're not, and let me be clear with the word competitive. I'm not trying to create the world's most competitive game. I meant like the experience itself is market competitive, which is that when you come to play a TCG, I want to be able to deliver you an experience that is worthy of your time, and if not the most worthy of your time, right? I want to have a really darn good game, Yeah, and I think that, one of the challenges, right, is like, I do think that we have, again, taken some of these like core elements and given them satisfying spiritual successors. And that is kind of my full statement on that. And I think that in hindsight, it'll be really clear, kind of like what I'm talking about. And I hope that people can love them. But there were challenges with the competitive play, originally. And, and some of those were just like unfair, right? Like, I think that there were elements that people liked because they were not tested in environments with thousands of players. But if the growth had occurred, these things would fall apart like really quick, and so like our R&D was able to like break the game in the old game in big ways, like really, really, really quickly, within hours. And so like, that's concerning. that's a really concerning experience. And so like the ground up rebuild is not about finding ways to circumvent or facade things. Is like, I'm not trying to like Trojan horse new stuff in, like that's not really it. It really is like our approach to everything has been, okay, what is Metazoo? You might have heard me in other interviews say, like, we want to ask this question. We want to know what is Metazoo. And we want to build from there, right? We want to build the game that is going to feel like Metazoo, that is going to support Metazoo, that's going to make people want to do more with this thing that they experience through the gameplay, right? So there's two directions. There's people who have the product for other reasons. We want to give them a game that they want to play. We also want to give people who want to play games a game where once they play it, they want to do these other things, right? And so this kind of like interwoven nature, we can't have a game where people show up to a tournament and have a dissatisfying experience, And so like, I mean, even Metazoo grappled with it itself. They very quickly realized like, people blowing each other's cards all over the table, probably not a sustainable way to play the game, right? And so like they had to figure that out too. But the example I always give is like, you don't want to take your family of 5, use all your vacation days and spend thousands of dollars to show up to a tournament. And you've built these decks and you've put all this effort in, and then you walk into a competitive environment and you lose because somebody at another table is standing next to a guy with a balloon. Like, is that a competitive, like, is that satisfying? No, like and so it's like, I think people love some of these elements and we want to incorporate these elements, but we want to do it in a way that's sustainable for the actual realities of playing the game. And that is to say that like we connect what's inside the box with what's outside the box, right? There's no difference in the product that we're delivering in our mindset between what I hand you and how you experience it, right? Like that is the product. The product is not just what we print on a card, but what do you do with that card? What are the scripts of success that we provide you for how to use that card? And so just thinking about, again, this full metagame stack, all of the things that we want you to do and all of the things that we want you to be able to enjoy, like how can we make this a fully satisfying experience? And so, yeah, I do believe like really like when people play the game, like it's going to be jarring a little bit, right? And that, and I know that's dangerous. That's really dangerous for me to say, right? But it will be jarring a little bit, in that I think that it will feel different, right? At the same time, I have full confidence, full faith that when people actually get through like the game, they play the game, then they go. I think that they're going to say this does feel like Metazoo. You know what I mean? Like this is actually, oh, that's really interesting. That's really clever how they pulled that way through, or like, oh, that element is familiar. I hadn't thought about doing it this way. And then you do it and it's like really satisfying, right? And I think that we're on those fronts, I think we're definitely going to win. But also people can still, like the other game, like we're not wiping it off the face of the earth. Like you'll still be able to play. But we just like are the game that we're creating, like with the new IP.
I think to back you up there as well, playing or learning any new TCG is jarring. That's just the way it is, because they all have similar elements. They're all born from the same sort of place, like trading card, tabletop gaming, but they all have different mechanics and different ways that you interact with certain things, and counter abilities, non-counter abilities, combo abilities, no combo abilities, where you get your resource, your mana, all that stuff. So, any new TCG or playing any game that you haven't played previously is always going to be jarring. So I'm excited. I had faith in yourself and the team before we started the interview, and after everything we've covered to this point, and to Lee's point, about trust and stuff earlier on, like I have all the faith in the world in yourself and the team, and I know that it's going to be a good product. Now, just send me a box. I just need a box.
Right. Yeah.
I just need a box. I can't wait. I know that timelines were a issue for previous management. And that was probably, in my opinion, over-promising. I think, too many collaborations, too many sets, too many mini sets or too many promos or plushie drops and all these sorts of things. Are you guys going to is your plan a more standard approach? When you say look at someone like the Pokemon Company, they release sets every 2 to 3 months. Is that kind of have you got your own roadmap in mind of what it's going to look like?
Yeah, we have a roadmap in mind. I think that we could do more than any game in terms of SKUs right now and still feel like we streamlined compared to the old game. Just the number of SKUs that they were producing everywhere, right? Kind of crazy. There's something that I love about that, which is to say that there was always something to engage with. I find that really cool. But I think that we want to reserve more of that for experiences that are more tailored. And, I would rather have, it's less financially lucrative. It'd be more financially lucrative if I just sell you a thing. But I want to have really cool cards in organized play, and I want that to be a competitive experience, not just something where you get kind of this trivial stamped version and, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. And that's kind of the end of the experience. I think that's true for a lot of games, right? I want to intentionally use real assets to make OP cool, satisfying, fun, and so OP is what we're focusing on, but I think that there are other things, there are other experiences that we want to make sure that we're reserving enough, that we're not just blowing everything out through kind of a random release and it becomes really a disparate experience and people aren't sure how to collect, at some point, and so, yeah, especially if you get to the point where it's you're doing that and you're not releasing sets, right? And then people really don't know how to collect, right? It's are these the sets or these promos? I think there was confusing messaging that I think that we're going to have a more defined way of understanding that. And in that sense, I think it will feel more traditional. But at the same time, we're not afraid to innovate. We're not tying ourselves. We try to first principle everything, right? Which is we try to look at what did exist and we try to look at what we're trying to create. And we try to look at, okay, so why are we doing this? Right? Every single time, okay, I think this SKU would be really cool. Why? Why do I think that's cool? What am I trying to accomplish, right? How does that fit into the scheme of the metagames, in the consumer experience? And then from there, is this the best way to do that? And so in deciding the trade-offs of what am I optimizing for a consumer experience versus a play experience? What am I optimizing for, all of these different things, which consumer is geared towards? I think that we're trying to really take all of that into account and deliver something that's really satisfying, which is, again, I keep jumping back to kind of this 40,000 foot view of we're trying to tie this knot, we're trying to pull all of these things together. But that you'll feel that in just sort of the pace of the releases and the way by which you get a chance to interact with these cards. And in that regard, that is where I think I am the most useful almost to Metazoo, which is that I've collected promo cards all my life, right? And I've been, intimately familiar with kind of when is that satisfying? How is that satisfying? What is the relative rarity that's appropriate for different types of promotions that you're doing? When do you use kind of different assets, right? Because if you can't just if every single promo was an alternate art, that wouldn't be fun. It actually wouldn't be. People may think I like alt arts. Give me 5,000 alt arts, but then you get 5,000 alt arts and you're it just washes out the experience, right? So just kind of finding those balances and really tapping into my experience as a hobbyist. What is it that I wanted my trading card game of choice to do better? Well, now that I'm in that seat, how do I do that better, right? And how do I execute
What an
on
exciting seat. I'm actually so jealous. That'd be so much fun. And you could see the passion and the fun, when you talk about it. So yeah, it is very exciting that you are in that seat and are going to be, working with the team, sort of steering the ship. I think from a direct question point of view, we've probably sort of hit you with everything that we wanted to know. Is there anything that perhaps you wanted to bring to the table that we may have not asked or missed, or something upcoming that you wanted to make mention of?
No, not in specifics, other than to just say that, everything that I've said is really easy to talk about from like this super big brand view. But like, I think the message that I hope that your listeners like really take home is we're also thinking about what this looks like in Australia, right? And so we are very, like I'm here intentionally, to signal that Australian card collectors are worth my time, right? Like that, I am viewing these segments of like where we want to be in the world, as whole things unto themselves. And so like, I'm not just thinking about a card experience and then exporting that, right? I'm thinking about your card experience, and I want to know what that's like. And so, I really hope that people will engage in the Discord. I really hope that people will take the time to let us know, like, who are the cryptids you recognize, right? Like, who are you excited to see? And I think that we've taken a shot at that, right? And that, give me some sets, let me get some organized play experiences. Let me get some human to human experiences in front of you, and let's make it an ongoing dialogue, right? Like, continue to engage with the product, and let's zero in. Let's make it really cool. Because it's one thing, even as an American consumer, like a lot of times I get a Japanese IP that then gets exported to me, right? And so the idea of having an IP that gives such depth and such opportunity to make something culturally resonant, that is so exciting and so cool, like, to me, right? Which is, I've talked a lot in Pokemon interviews that I've done where I've, identified times where I like almost feel frustrated, where I'm like, okay, like, do you even like me as an American consumer? You know what I mean? Like, I almost there are times, like, as a Pokemon collector where I've been like, do you resent me? Like what did I do? Like, and so like, I don't want that feeling, and I think that as we look, globally, as we look to make a satisfying experience in these regions, my hope is that we'll hit a home run. My hope is that we will be a game that people play and they feel seen, where they feel like and I'm sure, I mean, you guys could probably speak to this better. Am I correct? Like, am I getting it right that there are times where it's like, okay, like, oh, we get America's product, cool. Where it's like, you're just fighting for access, like representation's like such a far cry from the experience that you get. And so, like, what I really look forward to is when someone from New Zealand gets to see a cryptid that they recognize and feel some sort of connection to, and then, engage with that through organized play in a special way, like, how cool is that? Like, it's awesome. Yeah. That's where our heart is oriented.
No, fantastic. Well, Charlie, we've bled you for time. We took quite a bit of time up, so I think we'll leave it there. I can't thank you enough for making the time to come on the show to address, obviously, Lee and I, the broader community, and of course the Australian community. We really, really appreciate it. Some really good insights into yourself, into the business, into the future. Like I said a little bit earlier on, I have the utmost confidence in yourself, the team, and where this is going to go, and I am excited for Metazoo all over again, like I was, when in its inception. So, thank you again so much for coming on today, and yeah, we will keep this dialogue open, because as things transpire, we'd love to have you back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll keep having things to say, and I really hope that we'll be able to look back in the future and say that this was like an underdeveloped conversation. Like that this is like there's such cool things happening that we can't believe how excited we were for nothing. So yeah, I think that we're building on something cool, and that's going to happen. That's not me. I'm not building something cool. Like I think that you guys are building something cool, which is a community and a group of people who are excited to do TCG together. And I'm honored that Metazoo would be one of the ways that you choose to do that.
No, thank you so much, Charlie. We'll talk to you soon. Oh wow, another cracking guest episode, and this time like one that really like into the soul. Listening
to Charlie talk makes you kind of want to run through walls, listening to how passionate he is about it, and going, no, I really do believe in this guy. And also the resume of him and the team behind him are coming in. They've done it before. Yeah. We're not talking, they've been in this industry for over 20 years.
Made that very evident in, just in terms of backing themselves as well. Like, yes, they understand there was a game there beforehand. And yes, people liked aspects of said game. But there was far more many failures as a business or as a company that there were successes in reality, no matter which way you break it down. So, their approach is we know what works and we know how to, build something that you can enjoy in multiple aspects. And they're going to do that. And I have the utmost confidence and trust.
Yeah.
So, it's...
and that was awesome to hear him talk about.
Yeah.
They're going to let their products, the way they run their business, do the talking to gain the trust back.
Yeah.
It's something that they have to earn, and it's great to hear him talk about that. So,
So, hope you guys enjoyed this spontaneous guest episode. We're very excited to dive back into the world of Metazoo and just enjoy that as fans of the game that we are. So, don't forget to go over to the Instagram at @the_hobby_pod. Give us a follow there. Drop some comments on the posts. We always like to know what you're thinking. Click the Speak Pipe link in the description to call up for the Hobby Heroes. We've got some awesome calls waiting, so we can't wait to go through those on the next Boys Only episode. And we've also linked the Metazoo Discord in the description, so go jump in there, come hang out, have a chat. It's where, everything that's anything is happening at the moment. So definitely get in there. Anything else from you, Colonel?
Make sure you head over onto YouTube and like, comment, subscribe on there. Really important. And also let us know some of the guests that you'd like to see coming up as well.
We've never asked that, have we?
We've been really fortunate to interview some awesome people in the hobby. So I want to know, who do you want to hear from? Who should we reach out? Who should we shoot our shot with? Let us know.
Yeah, I like that. But that's it for today. That is Wheels Up, and we are out of here. We'll see you on the next one.